couple of weeks ago, I could hear Neva's alarm from her room. Neva is our 11-year-old. She shuffles into our room at 6:30 in the morning and she says to me, "Hey, Mom, you are getting up with me, aren't you?" "I am," I say, and admonish myself for going to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. But it's her first day of middle school, so I'm up. We get ready, pack her lunch, and we walk out to the bus at 7:04. And there, that kid stands, kind of nervous and yet grounded at the same time. She has that rock-solid kind of fortress of a person. I envy her often and aspire to be her. The bus comes and she gets on and she drives on into her new life, filled with a bus with teenagers and a new bus driver I don't know. I walk back down the driveway and I think back to 10 years ago. Neva was 18 months old when we came here to work at First Unitarian, Scott and I. And now she's taller than most, or close to a lot of my grown-up friends. For 10 years, ministry in this Finger Lakes area has called us to dream and scheme and plan and imagine. You've walked side by side with Scott and side by side with me. You've walked side by side with Sarah, and now you're walking side by side with Marcus and Emily too. It is with this last 10 years kind of fresh in my mind that we prepare to start our Roots and Wings meetings. It's a good time, in concert with First Unitarian, to look at where we've been, where we are now, and where we are going in the next 10 years. Where this partnership and commitment to each other as institutions and as people will lead us. So all of you have a card in front of you. I invite you to fill it out and please drop it in that basket there. We're trying to get everybody in the congregation to come to one of these Roots or Wings meetings, which are November 23rd after the service and December 14th after the service. But all you have to do now is put your name on there and your email address, and we'll take care of the rest. We'll get you there. Okay? It has been with this image of Neva in my head over the last 10 years of my roots. It's been great grounding. Great way to think about where we're going. And yet, it has been hard to keep the news out of my head that's happened in the last month or so. You see, I'm a football fan. I am a Green Bay Packer fan. I even get to go to Lambeau this year and watch them play the Eagles. And they better win. So I follow the news in football, in the NFL. And whether you're a fan or not, it's been hard to not miss the news about Ray Rice, the running back for the Baltimore Ravens, who was let go from the team. A video surfaced a couple weeks ago of Rice punching his fiancée at the time in an Atlantic City casino. Months before, he was given 2 weeks of suspension for that, but then was brought back. But then the video surfaced kind of, and it shows him punching his now fiancée, Janae, or his wife, Janae, and he pulls her out of the elevator with her face down and puts her in the hallway. It's a disturbing video of violence. And clearly, a targeted campaign by the NFL to let go of a very bad seed. I've also, as maybe you have, had the death of Rochester police officer Darrell Pearson, who died tragically in a shooting the beginning of September. Pearson was allegedly shot by Thomas Johnson, who had actually been in jail for 3 years and had just been let out for a burglary charge. Pearson was rightly celebrated and honored at the Blue Cross Arena. There were 1,000 of his colleagues who came from around the state to be there. And in the words of Mayor Lovely Warren, she said he was a man of dedication and faith, great love and commitment and compassion, a man who worked daily to eradicate this city of illegal weapons and dangerous criminals. So in the end, we're left, of course, with a community rocked by violence, with another bad seed that is responsible. In the news, the conversation about how to bring both individuals to justice has been kind of paramount. It is clear Rice and Johnson need to take responsibility for their actions, no doubt. And it is our job as a citizenry to punish individuals for their wrongs and hold them accountable to their actions. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. Punishment is due. Accountability to one's acts of horror is due. And yet, it makes me wonder, where are the people that are saying, yes, that's true, and? I realize what I'm about to talk about is intimidating and tricky. Part of the reason for not saying yes and has to do with how acutely sharp the pain is regarding Pearson. You can definitely feel it in Rochester and in other places that I've traveled through. How raw it is for people. And I know that. So I say this with a light touch, but I want us to ask ourselves, where are the people acknowledging that we play, you and me, suburban, urban, rural, rich and middle class and poor, play a part in all of this, whether we want to admit it or not. Officer Pearson was shot actually near the intersection of Hudson Avenue and Weaver Streets in Rochester, which is one of the city's deepest pockets of poverty. According to recent census data, 42% of people who live in that neighborhood live below the poverty line. Unemployment in that neighborhood runs at 32%. The New York State Education Department just released statistics for students who entered Rochester public schools in 2009 and then graduated this year, 2013. For the city of Rochester, there were 43% of them that had made it through. The state's average is 76%. We are at the bottom of the bottom. So, is it really not that hard to believe that if we have a failed education system and a failed penal system and a failed employment system, that we may end up with people failing to find or know any solid ground besides disconnection when all they've ever known is failure? Is it that hard to believe that in a game like football, that's a violent sport, that does not talk about violence on the field, then moving to the home, and every year, there are charges for different players, from sexual to domestic to public exchanges against a player. And what always happens is a little tisk-tisk, take them out for a couple weeks, and then they go back in again. So if you watched it, it shouldn't be that surprising that Ray Rice and his wife Janae are a little bewildered at the media attention and frankly quite shocked that he is being let go. And for good reason, as far as I can tell, actually, and I've watched this a lot, the only reason they are singling out Ray Rice is because they have a video of the exchange, and the NFL is trying to raise the viewership with females. So why not pull all the attention from a systemic problem to one bad seed? This last week, they've lifted up more players, but they still talk about it as bad seeds in a system. I ask this question because I think it points to something our faith needs to wrestle with as well. Who is responsible, actually, for tilling and fertilizing and caring for the seed? In the entire burden of the bad seed on them alone? Or is the issue larger and more complicated? Does the extent to what happens to that seed have something to do with the soil? Again, I want to make myself clear. I'm not suggesting that there is anything to excuse in this horrific act. And we should hold them accountable. Bad seeds accountable. They need to be responsible. But again, where are the people saying yes? And where are the people asking who is responsible for the soil? And I ask this because I think the answer to that question matters when we are about to embark on our roots and wings discussions. A number of years ago, Robert Bellah, who is an American sociologist who worked mostly with religions, spoke at our largest gathering, the Unitarian Universalist convention. It's called General Assembly. And when he was there, he basically pointed out that one of the greatest strengths in our entire culture is the sacredness of the conscience of every individual. We hold individual rights tantamount. But he states, in that strength, of course, is always a shadow side, is always a weakness to it. With such high esteem put on individual rights, we can and do often end up with a populace that is selfish and meist, disconnected loners who believe that if you can't make it personally or financially or socially or emotionally, the fault is yours alone, with little other factors that actually play into it. And then he said something that really struck me. He said this to us. To us. You face in your very denomination the most basic conundrum of American life. If you can solve it, it may help lead the larger society out of the wilderness into which it has wandered. And then he asked us to do something. He asked us to take our first principle, which is the inherent dignity and worth of all individuals, and our last principle, which is the interdependence of the web, and switch them so that you have interdependence over independence. And when you think about the principles, they basically are what two denominations, when they came together in the 70s, they could agree on. That's it. It's pretty a low baseline of what it is that we are. And it made me wonder whether or not, really there was a lot of thought that went into which one came first and second and third and fourth. And I think one of the things that really struck me is when things are first on a list, I think human brains make them more important. It trumps other things often. Basically, he was saying that the only real hope for a promising future, the only hope for us being, as this month's worship theme is, of being a people of promise, rests on us somehow, some way, putting our inner dependence before our independence. That in order to thrive and survive as a culture, we need to recognize the responsibility of our lives gone awry, not resting all on a bad seed, but also on the bravery and dedication and sacrifice and vision of the tenders of the soil. I'm reminded of these words by my colleague, Reverend Victoria Safford, who said, "This is a congregation bound not by creed, but by covenant. We are bound by covenant, each to each other. The central question for us is not, what do we believe, but rather, what do we believe in? To what larger love, to what people and principles and values and dreams shall we be committed to? For a tradition so deeply steeped in individualism, it becomes a spiritual practice for us to live and know that the life of the Spirit is a solitary one. But our answers to these questions call us to speak. They call us to live in the plural. To live in the plural means we are responsible for the soil, as a community, as a tradition, as a church, as a people, inside these walls and outside these walls, everywhere. Our tradition actually says All of us, all of humanity is responsible for the soil. All of us. And when we don't do our part, we can't entirely blame the bad seeds alone for their actions. Instead, we must recommit ourselves to the care of the soil, so less bad seeds arise and thrive, and so there is promise instead of despair. This understanding of us, not as I, but as plural, what we are called to enter into these conversations of hope and healing that we're going to have together. I was trying to think through what that might look like, somebody who is a great tiller of the soil, and I came across this blog called Momastery by a woman named Glennon Doyle Melton. And she tells this little story on her blog. Her son Chase is in elementary school, and he is learning the new way to do long division. So she calls up Chase's teacher, and she says, we need some help. And the teacher says, well, bring Chase in, and I'll help him out. She goes, no. I don't understand this. Can I come in, and can you teach me how to do this? So she comes in to the classroom, and Chase's teacher helps her through the long division. She says it takes her about an hour. It probably didn't, but she's there. And then she starts having this conversation with the teacher about how the responsibility of kind of teaching has more to do not with necessarily having kids learn reading and writing, but actually producing children who are brave and kind. That's the larger responsibility. And then the teacher told her this. Every Friday afternoon, she asked her students to write on a piece of paper 4 names of kids that they would like to sit next to. And then she asked them to recommend one kid who has been like the stellar kid in the classroom. The kids all write it. They know it's confidential. They know they may not end up sitting next to that kid or not. But they all put it together. It's privately given to her. And when those children leave on Friday, she takes those notes out and she puts them out. And she's looking for patterns. Who is not getting requested by anyone else? Who doesn't even know who to request? Who never gets noticed enough to be nominated? Glennon comments, she says, Chase's teacher is not looking for a new seating chart or exceptional citizens. Chase's teacher is looking for lonely children. She's looking for children who are struggling to connect with other children. She's identifying the little ones who are falling through the cracks of the class's social life. She is discovering whose gifts are being unnoticed by their peers. And she, more than anything else, is finding who is being bullied and who's doing the bullying. Glennon asked the teacher when she started doing this whole piece. And she said to her, the Friday after Columbine and every Friday since. This brilliant woman watched Columbine knowing that all violence begins with disconnection. All outward violence begins as inner loneliness. She watched that tragedy knowing that children who aren't being noticed, who are seeds, are left unnoticed and untended by others, will eventually resort to being noticed by any means. She gets that even love, even belonging has a pattern to it. And she finds those patterns through her lists. She breaks the code of disconnection, and then she gets lonely kids actually the help that they need. It's math to her. All love, even love, is math. Got done with that article and realized that teacher was indeed a visionary tiller of the soil. And that our work together, and in the future, starts with this work as plural, as we, as interdependent. Our visioning and striving and imagining starts with interdependence first, a togetherness that roots us all of us, in love. I want to end with this poem from Tess Gallagher called The Hug. A woman is reading a poem on the street, and another woman stops to listen. We stop too with our arms around each other. The poem is being read and listened to out there in the open. Behind us, no one is entering or leaving the houses, and suddenly a hug comes over me, and I'm giving it to you like a variable star shooting light off to make itself comfortable, then subsiding. I finish, but keep holding on. A man walks up to us, and we know that he hasn't come out of nowhere, but if he could, he would have. He looks homeless because of his need. Can I have one of those? He asks you, and I feel you nod. I'm surprised you don't tell him how it is that I am yours, only yours, exclusive like a nose on a face. Love, that's what we're talking about. Love that nabs you with, for me only, and holds on. So I walk over to him, and I put my arms around him and try to hug him like I mean it. He's got an overcoat on that is so thick I can't feel him past it, and I'm starting the hug, and I'm thinking, how big a hug is this supposed to be? How long shall I hold this hug? Already we could be eternal. His arms falling over my shoulders, my hands not meeting behind his back. He is so big. I put my head into his chest and snuggle in. I lean into him. I lean my blood and my wishes into him, and he stands for it. This is his, and he's starting to give it back so well. I don't know if my lover has walked away, or if the woman is still doing the poem, or the houses. What about the houses? Clearly, a little permission is a dangerous thing. But when you hug someone, you want it to be a masterpiece of connection, the way that the button of his coat will leave the imprint of a planet on my cheek when I walk away, and when I try to find some place to go back to. There's a button on the back of your Roots and Wings card. I'd like you to take it off. I'd like you to keep it in a pocket or under your pillow or in your little cup piece in your car. Put it on your key ring. I don't really care. Put it somewhere that when you ever doubt that our work together, that our love is nothing short of a buttonhole imprinted on our cheeks, reminding us of our interdependence, our we, is the planet that we can return to. The button's going to remind you. Together, friends, let us dream and create the world not just that we aspire to, but want imprinted into our very lives. May it be so. Amen.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.